Good evening. We raise the proposed motion, be it resolved that inclusion education ultimately benefits Bahamian communities, schools, and classrooms in general, but also each student in particular. My colleagues, Shanique Taylor, Tara Nurse, Garcia Hanna, Byron Jones, Alith Adley, Brian Knowles, and yours truly, Deandra Roll, will provide arguments that will leave you absolutely convinced that our premise of inclusion is the most important innovation in education any nation, but especially this nation, can make. I now invite Shanique Taylor to present our opening arguments.
Thank you, Deandra. Let's go right into our discussion. Firstly, let us acknowledge that today's debate is moot. The Bahamas already has the legal framework in place in the form of the Persons with Disabilities Equal Opportunities Act 2014. It was established to provide certain rights to persons with disabilities, and for our discussion, specifically rights for education. In addition, the Bahamas' commitment to persons with disabilities was further strengthened when we became a signatory to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This will preempt any arguments that our opponents might put forward against the idea of inclusion. What is meant by inclusion? The term inclusion captures in one word an all-embracing societal ideology that secures opportunities for students with disabilities to learn alongside their non-disabled peers in general education classrooms. With all that said, we are aware that many may not understand the particulars of the Person with Disabilities Equal Opportunities Act, or are concerned about its implementation into what many consider an already burdened education system. One potential fair tactic our opponents may use would be along the lines of special needs students need special facilities to include them into the regular classroom, and who's paying for that? Cost is an important consideration, and we know that nothing in life is free, especially in this post-bad age. And we know that it does take money to adequately support special needs students in mainstream classrooms. However, the argument of cost is null when we stop to compare the cost of completely separating special needs children in their own classrooms or schools. Is it really more cost-effective to provide special needs students with separate facilities, separate administration, and teaching staff, and separate maintenance bills? Each disabled child in attendance entitles a school to additional funding in order to cover the increased difficulty in teaching through that disability. Schools that practice inclusion still receive this additional funding for disabled in attendance, but thanks to the wide acceptance of inclusive practices, schools can now include disabled students in the regular, less costly classroom. While additional teachers' aides and other resources of cost may be needed in the classroom at this point, there is still a massive savings experienced the extinction of the pricey specialized classroom. The resulting surplus of funding and resources can then be utilized in other areas of the school in need, for example, in the training of new teachers and teacher assistants, school counselors, equipping nurses, facilities, etc., etc. I will leave you with this thought. The advantages of inclusion within education have been well outlined in the research and scientific literature. It is increasingly evident that there are social and economic benefits for all children involved in inclusive education. Add to this the moral, ethical, and social justice issues raised by exclusion, and we consider the argument that non-inclusive forms of education indefensible. I now turn you over to my team member, Tara Nurse, who will provide you with more scientific data to support our position. Taryn?
Thank you, Shanique. It is our position that inclusion is best practice for disabled and non-disabled students alike. As studies show that when inclusion is done well, the whole class benefits, and these benefits further translate beyond the classroom. The argument may be made that inclusion takes away focus from non-disabled students, but in fact, it has been proven that inclusion does quite the opposite. We would refer you to the scientific literature, notably Bunch and Bailey in 1998, and many others. Inclusion systems provide students with teachers who have been trained in a wide range of differentiated instruction. When supported and given adequate training and tools, teachers in inclusive classrooms understand and instruct a variety of learners, individualizing instruction to meet the needs of all learners. Students have varied needs and strengths, whether disabled or not, and teachers in inclusive settings learn to address this and teach better because of it. Teachers with these capabilities are not only able to best cater to their disabled students, but to the exceptional learners and student body in general, as they have been trained in identifying a student's individual needs. In UNICEF's annual State of the World's Children report, the organization's executive director spoke thusly: "When you see the disability before the child, it is not only wrong for the child, but it deprives society of all that child has to offer. Their loss is society's loss. Their gain is society's gain." Lest we forget, the ultimate goal of our nation's education system is to prepare its future generations for their eventual integration into the adult society. Inclusive classrooms prepare our students for the emotional realities of the adult world by training them to recognize and celebrate the diverse nature of humanity. However, according to the University of Birmingham's Alexander Kay's topic guide article, Inclusive Growth, there is also mounting evidence for the impact that inclusive growth has on reducing poverty and inequality, as it allows for previously excluded groups to gain greater access to education, employment, and business opportunities. Inclusion systems have the potential to impact society at large, as they push an environment of support amongst children, and this environment enhances their ability of disabled and non-disabled children to cooperate, work together, understand and value different perspectives, think critically, and of course even test well. In challenging gifted and talented learners to support their disabled peers through tutoring, schools foster a more responsive learning environment and promotes social cohesion. And this is perhaps the greatest benefit of inclusive practices, is that it trains students to become better citizens, both academically and socially. I now welcome my tier member Garcia, who will present further arguments that will support our discussion.
As teachers and teachers candidates ourselves, we are aware of the many challenges we may face, but we are also very aware that success is not gained without hard work. To quote JFK in his moon speech, he said, "We choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy. We choose to go to the moon because it is hard." As Bahamians and educators, we choose to implement inclusion, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. It might be less convenient at first for teachers, students, and parents to learn about and embrace the disabled student population at their schools, but there is no inherent right within the Constitution that says we are to be free from inconvenience. As stated in the 2013 State of World's Children's Report, and I quote, "Discrimination on the grounds of disability is a form of oppression," unquote. Disabled students can achieve. Their talents and gifts are varied, as are the talents and gifts of all students. They are legally entitled to an appropriate public education. They also have so much to offer their non-disabled peers, teachers, and schools. We note that the Bahamas would be one of the several countries that would be moving away from segregated education systems to a more inclusive model. Hayes and Bullard, 2017, Cooper and al., 2018, have reported that while most Western democracies lead the way, several poor nations like Ethiopia, Zimbabwe are making significant progress in incorporating inclusion in their educational systems. The Bahamas has to continue in its moral and social justice mission of providing the best possible education to all its citizens. As I close our discussion tonight, I ask you to remember one word: empathy. How children view peers who look and learn differently from themselves is to be considered as they grow to adulthood and become members of their communities. As they live and work alongside a diverse array of citizens, it is a critical factor in whether communities and workplace are able to function and thrive.